Hi everyone. It's Sunday evening where I live, and I'm so sorry that what am I sorry about? Nothing. I'm not sorry about anything. So I changed my chair, whatever. Grabbing our book. I am reading from chapter 29 to chapter 32. So I'm going to share a tea. And the tea I'm going to share is about my writing. So, this is basically for writers. This is for writers. If you're a writer out there, don't give up. Don't give up. What did I say? Don't give up. If you're a writer out there, don't give up. I was sharing about my writing journey with someone today, and I was so excited the way I was sounding. And the lady said, "Wow, you're so fired up." And I said, writing is my life. And I discovered and I realized writing is my life. I've done other jobs, I've done all manner of things, but writing and teaching writing is what I enjoy most. And I'm happy that I'm doing this. So don't give up on your passion. Don't give up on what you love to do. It may not earn you an income immediately. It will come. That income will come. That joy, that freedom you want, everything you want will come. Just stay focused. Les Brown said, stay focused on your focus, and you will become a focus. And that's my tea for today. So let's read. Again, I got my kombucha. This kombucha is guava flavor. It's somehow like palm wine. I'm sorry. Don't worry. Of course, I have my water. Water. Sorry. Okay, so now let's get onto this and read. So my name is Simisola Ogoyinka. Sorry, I'm almost forgetting myself. And we are reading Scent of Water. Scent of Water is a book I wrote almost 20 years ago, and it's still one of my favorites. All right, so let's read together. Chapter 29. Esam, please, if for no other reason, if on no other occasion, please, just this once, Ephraim had pleaded. Court reconvened at exactly 2 o'clock. Judge Kofo walked into the court and took her exalted position. Everyone else sat down after her. Esam and Amma sat together at the side of the courtroom where they got a good glance at Mike. He had spotted them immediately as he entered and felt elation. Ephraim must have called her. She wore the same things with her twin, and Mike couldn't differentiate the two, if not for the intense look that mirrored his own on Esam's face. Amma, though tense, smiled and nodded a greeting as he was escorted in. He responded with a nod before settling his gaze on Esam. He mouthed the words, "I love you," but doubted she understood. This was neither the time nor the place, but he didn't care much for anything. He wanted to say more. Vowed he would if God would just grant his only wish, freedom. Coincidentally, Sandra sat beside Esam. Obviously, the two women had not met. She looked loud and obnoxious beside the cool beauty of Esam. He wondered why he had not divorced her long ago. I have studied carefully all the testimonies presented before me and without bias come to a conclusion. Will the defense counsel rise for the reading of the judgment? Judge Kofo said. Ephraim and his law assistant rose. Esam and Amma held their hands tight. Both hands were cold. Esam spoke in tongues in prayer under her breath. They had all thought Judge Kofo would give her verdict the following day. Well, the vigil they had scheduled for the night would have to be turned to a praise night vigil by faith. She didn't want to imagine otherwise. Ephraim had pleaded with her on the phone like never before to be there, stating that Sandra had even showed up suddenly. Mike needed a known face in the crowd, and it wasn't Sandra's he wanted. In the case of Lagos State versus Michael Olasoji Dabi Sr., heard and judged on the 20th of September 2001 at the Federal High Court, Ikeja, which, when filed on appeal at the Federal Court of Appeal, Calabar, was granted and hereby retried in the Federal High Court, Calabar. I, Justice Kofo Ayeni, Honorable Judge of the Federal High Court, hereby uphold the verdict and judgment of the Federal High Court on charges against the accused. Mike's head drooped. Ephraim swallowed hard. Amma and Esam squeezed their hands harder. Esam gasped. Sandra remained calm, waiting. As per the charge of voluntary drunk driving, to which I uphold the sentence of 2 years at a federal prison, which was determined by the Federal High Court, to the charge of manslaughter on 2 counts, to which the accused received the maximum sentence of a life imprisonment with the condition of pardon not earlier than 15 years, I hereby. Judge Kofo looked up for the first time and glared directly at Mike. He didn't see her. His head was bowed. He was tapping his fingers, drawing circles with his mind. His eyes were shut. State for the records that the sentence was harsh. Mike's head jolted up, and he opened his eyes to see the judge staring down at him. And uncalled for, the accused was a first offender and was on his lane, though drunk. It is unfortunate that the other driver died instantly. It could as well have been the accused who lost his life. Besides, it is unfair for him to be punished for the death of his son. My own first son will be 37 in a few days, and I can only imagine the pain this accused has been through. On humanitarian grounds, therefore, I overturn the maximum sentence and sentence the accused to 2 years in a federal prison for involuntary manslaughter on 2 counts. There was a general murmur around the courtroom. Mike did a small bow to thank the judge. 2 years was better than 15 or a lifetime. He would watch the clock tick per minute till he got to the end of it. In addition, I state that the sentences be converted to time already served by the accused in the federal prison Calabar, pronounced Justice Kofo with an audacious mien. There was a shriek, hallelujah, from the audience. It came from the strangely overdressed lady in the purple and lilac embroidered velvet. For the first time, Esam figured she could be Sandra and swallowed, repelled. Judge Kofo's gavel hit hard as she shouted, "Order!" She turned to look at Ephraim. Mr. Michael Dabi built the house in which my son resides in Lagos. And one comment I had about the house was that it was built up to standard. His quality is first grade. I must confess, I was shocked to see him in my court, she said softly. Ephraim was shocked, pleasantly so. Your client is free, counsel. You can take him home. I rise, she said, all in one breath. Shouts of joy erupted from the courtroom as the court bailiff shouted, "Order!" repeatedly. Judge Kofo stood up and left the courtroom quietly. Ephraim turned and shook his assistants first, then shook Okoneno. I think the judgment was fair, Okoneno said and winked. It was a good fight. He picked his papers and left the courtroom with a trail of reporters trying to get his comments. Ephraim turned here and there, shaking hands and thanking people. Mike stood calmly and nodded to a couple of sympathizers. From behind, Sandra came and dragged him into her arms, crying and shouting hallelujah with the same shrill voice. If his hands were free, he would have pushed her away, but he stood calmly and endured her. His gaze followed Esam in the meanwhile as she turned here and there, thanking and hugging people. She deliberately avoided his gaze. It hurt him. It is all right, Sandra. I can't breathe, he said as he held on to the railing of the dock. Photographers continued to snap the pictures. Ephraim finally came to him, barking orders at the prison's officials to loose the chains. He still has to come back to the prison to check out, a prison official said. Ephraim scowled. The chains were removed and the two men hugged tight. We made it, man, Ephraim said. I told you we would. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank her also, Mike sighed. By the time they were ready to leave the courtroom had cleared except for one or two loitering reporters who wanted to see all to the end. Esam was gone. She hadn't even come close enough to congratulate him. Just to see. Hmm, a little more than it. Chapter 30. At Oman Prison, aka Afokan, Mike submitted his uniforms and other prison articles. He was cleared, discharged, and released officially to Barrister Esam Bassey. Effiong, Offiong, excuse me. Effiong took him to Tune 7 Bodywear's boutique on MCC Road. The shop resembled one of those where Mike shopped at in Lagos, like Wise Men or Men's Line. Earlier, they'd noticed Sandra following them in a taxi. At 2:07, she told them she needed to make some calls, rest, and join them later. Ifeom gave her the house address and gave the driver specific directions to his house at Ibom Layout. After she left, Mike sighed and relaxed. He picked a pair of jeans, beige chinos pants, leather pump slippers, a leather belt, one black Italian suit, one navy safari suit, a pair of black Italian shoes, two silk ties, a Hugo perfume, toiletries, and a shaving kit, a couple of shirts, a white Senegalese kaftan, t-shirts, and a few other items. Effiong settled the bill. On their way to Effiong's, Mike opened up. I really want to thank you for everything. I feel fulfilled, Mike. I thank you for giving me this case. Effiong gushed. You can't believe how many calls I've gotten from all sorts of people who want to hire me. I hope you've not forgotten that boy, Ekpeyon. His case is back in the magistrate's court at Ikom. We even got him off on bail. We will win. Thanks, that's great. Thank you. Mike sighed. He still couldn't believe he was free. About the expenses I owe you, I'd like to have the figures, please. I'll draw it up for you. It's quite a sum, you know. I had to pay to get the press interested in this case. I took a loan from the bank. It's just the figures I need and a 6-month period. Mike said confidently. Well, the loan is 2 months gone now. I took a 2 million naira loan. Over a million went into press releases and stuff. That reminds me, we scheduled a press conference for this evening at my house. This evening, we are having a party to celebrate the victory, Ephraim said. That soon? You're incredible. The case is still hot. After the press conference, dinner will be served. I wanted us to win. I wasn't sure we would, but I acted in faith and went ahead to hire a caterer, invite guests. Wonderful. I like your collection of clothes. You have great taste. Your looks will astound the whole country tonight. Thanks, Mike said, his mind already calculating different ways of setting the loans. You took a big risk taking a loan for this case. What if we didn't win? We had to. All was at stake. What Ephraim refused to tell him was that Esam's house was on mortgage to the bank. The beautiful two-bedroom house valued at 3 million naira had been used as collateral to collect the loan. Esam had been too glad to lose the house if it would give Michael freedom. Ephraim's house was a simple three-bedroom apartment situated in the heart of Ibom layout, one of the nicer parts of town. He had a beautiful flower garden. Mike, being a property person, assessed the house closely. There were two semi-detached bungalows in the compound. Ephraim's part was well manicured, green, and full of lovely flowers. A Toyota Corolla Hunchback was parked outside the gate, Esam's car. Another similar Corolla was parked inside the compound. Ephraim parked his Peugeot 505 beside the Corolla inside. Welcome to my humble home. It's a beautiful place, Mike replied. That's a big compliment from a property magnate. Ifyom smiled. Humor me, Mike said. Ifyom opened the front door and a crowd inside burst into singing, for he's a jolly good fellow, for he's a jolly good fellow, for he's a jolly good fellow, and so says all of us, and so says all of us, and so says all of us. For he's a jolly good fellow, for he's a jolly good fellow, for he's a jolly good fellow, and so says all of us. Hooray! There was a loud round of applause. Thank you, thank you. Effiong smiled. Mike looked round the room. The only familiar face was Amma's. She came to him and hugged him. I'm sure you want to bathe, change from this Effiong's small clothes, and rest a little. The press conference starts in an hour. She said to him, Yes, please. Thank you, he replied. First, let me introduce you to our family and friends, Amma said, and pulled him to the center of the parlor. Hello, everybody. Can I have your attention? She called. The room quieted. There must be more than 20 people in the room. As we all know, this is Michael Dabi. Mike, meet my parents, a Tubomam lady, Aye Enshaw. Mike bowed in greeting to the elderly couple, and Ephion's parents, Elder and Elder Mrs. Eyo Ene Ophiong. Mike greeted the other elderly couple, Ephion's elder brothers and their wives, George and Martha Ophiong, Henry and Eno Ophiong, Ophiong and Nkoyo Ophiong. Mike nodded. Ephion's eldest sister, Mrs. Ephiong Anwan Marsha. Mike nodded. Junior brothers and sisters of mine and Ephion's, Bassey Ephiong, Godswill Ophiong, Aye Enshaw Jr., Adora Enshaw, Imabong Enshaw, and Regina Ophiong. Mike nodded. Our friends, Emeka and Eno Ansta, Fred and Ineyi Oshe, and Esam's friend and colleague, Dr. Asa Agantem. Mike nodded and smiled at Asa. I feel really blessed to meet all of you, he said softly. Ah, Pastor, welcome. Effiong called as a middle-aged man walked in. Mike was introduced to him at once. Well, if you will excuse Mike, Amma said and left with Mike. She took him to the guest room, an ensuite and airy room. The curtains were a soft shade of blue. The king-size bed was dressed with navy blue and baby green sheets. Everything else was one shade or the other of blue and green, from the carpet to the tiles in the bathroom. It was a warm room. It looked like heaven to Mike. The air conditioner was on, and a 14-inch TV was placed at the corner below one of two sets of windows. Would you prefer hot or cold water for your bath? Cold, please. You can have as much as you want. The tap is running, Amma said. I'll have some food brought to you. Now, no, just a bottle of water. I can't eat just yet. Mike interrupted. Okay, I'll bring one. If you need anything, just give a shout, Amma said and headed for the door. Please, where is Esam? He asked. She was in the kitchen. I'll call her for you, Amma offered. No, please, I was just wondering. I'll see her later. He stammered. All right then. Congrats once again. I'm glad you're free, she said softly and left. Mike looked back at the room and at the bags of clothes he just bought. It was finally here. The freedom. He dropped on the bed and covered his face with his hands, biting his lower lip hard in disbelief. Just going to continue. All right. Chapter 31. Mike wore a long sleeve polo neck gray jersey shirt over the jeans he bought and the leather slippers. He knew it was a bit too casual for a press conference, but he didn't really care. He wanted to feel as free as possible. He had soaked himself in the shower the whole period, lathering himself with the perfumed soap he'd bought earlier over and over again, washing off the stain and smell of prison from his skin. When the knock on his door came, he was covered with soap lather. He shouted that he would be with them in a few minutes and rinsed himself off. He'd felt clean and confident. His face was clean shaven and smooth. He'd brushed so hard his gum was sore. It would take time to forget, but now was not too soon to start. He had to forget the audio or he would not be able to move forward. When he walked into the crowded parlor, everyone began clapping. He spotted Esam at one corner, and to his surprise, Sandra was in the forefront. He shook hands with some of the people and smiled pleasantly, inching his way toward Esam. When he got close, he whispered in our ears, more harshly than he intended, "We need to talk." The press conference was held under a canopy outside. Local and national pressmen threw questions at Mike, from issues about his incarceration to other irrelevant issues like if he was having an affair before he went to jail. "Sir, we noticed your wife came all the way to support you. Does that mean you are forgiving her for testifying against you?" No comments. "Are you going to sue your former attorney, Femi Williams, SAN? Have burnt old bridges. Are you ready to bounce back into the world of property prosperity more than before?" The questions flowed on and on. The party started 2 hours later. It was bigger than Mike imagined. Sandra clung to his sleeves like a leech. He finally settled to eat a little fried rice with fish and a bottle of water. After 5 years of prison food, he couldn't dare eat anything elaborate. His system would need time to readjust. At 11:30 p.m., he succeeded in sending Sandra away. He found Esam helping to clear the dishes in the kitchen. She was alone. "Hi," he said softly. She jumped and turned to face him. "Hi," she replied. "Sorry to scare you. You must be very tired." He tried to smile. "I am. It's been a very long day." She leaned against the washbowl and avoided his gaze. "You've been avoiding me," he said. "Your wife is around. Is that the problem?" "It's not a problem for me. What did you expect? I should cling to your other arm?" "My wife means nothing to us, and leave her to me to deal with. Besides, you'd been avoiding me before she showed up," he said. "Maybe I somehow knew she would come." She crossed and uncrossed her fingers. "Esther, that is ridiculous, and you know it. Listen, I've never felt like this about anyone before, never. When I look at you, I know how I feel." He stared at her intently. "It cannot work between us." "Why?" "Because you have a wife." Had. I had a wife. She has ceased to be my wife, Esam. Even God overlooks the days of ignorance. Even if nothing happens between us, Esam, I'm not going back to that marriage. Please. I'm not having this conversation. I want to go home. She made to leave. He blocked her way. "Esam, please. It's late and we need to talk about this. About what happened in that cell in the court. No, I want to go home. You can't drive this late alone. I'm ready to leave the guest room for you. Sleep in the parlor," he offered desperately. "No," she made to pass him. He grabbed her and hugged her. "Please, Esam," he whispered into the hollow of her neck. "No," she mumbled. There was a catch in her voice. He pulled back and looked into her face. She avoided his eyes. "What are you afraid of? You're trembling. I feel like that too. I want to be with you, Esam. I love you," he gushed. "No, no." She struggled to be free. He held on firmly, tired but not willing to give in. "Please, no." "All right, let me escort you. You can't go alone this day. Calabar is safe." She turned and ran off. He'd caught a glimpse of the tears. He followed her and bumped into a confused Amma. "What happened?" she asked. He looked toward the door and then at her. "I'd like to leave for Lagos in the morning." "Why? What happened?" "I need to see my mother." Ephraim came in from seeing friends off. "What am I hearing? What happened?" "I think it's Esam." His wife looked from one man to the other. "I don't understand her," Mike said angrily. "She won't talk to me. She said it's because of Sandra. But I don't think so. I think it's because I just got out of jail. I'm not good enough for her." "No, no way. That's not Esam at all." Ephraim protested quickly. She was badly hurt in her marriage, and she never knew any man before then, before she married Etubom Bassey, and none after. Amma swallowed. She's afraid of men generally, and she's withdrawn. He was a mean old man. He used to sit back and watch his old divorcee daughters slap her around the house. And maybe I shouldn't be talking to you about this one, but one of his sons raped her several times, Ephraim said. No, Mike gasped. Anger waves rose within his belly. Right now, she would rather date you than someone else, he sighed. I believe that. I still have to leave in the morning, he shrugged and walked off, his heart heavy. He couldn't sleep. It was well past midnight. The night before, he at African hadn't slept much either. He sat on the floor and envisioned Esam married to an old high chief. He imagined the house full of grown-up children, all bossing Etubom's new wife around. Then he imagined an unruly man pushing her down and forcing himself on her. No, he bellowed. Other ugly thoughts crossed his mind. His father having a cardiac arrest, his mother having the stroke that reduced her to a wheelchair. Then he saw Sandra philandering his hard-earned wealth, partying and probably prostituting. No, he bellowed once again. He even thought of African, the bad food, the prisoners that became his neighbors, the fags with their sights, sounds, and smells of sex. Ekpeyong, life in solitary. No, he screamed again, hugging himself and turning away from nothing in particular. Amma cuddled close to her husband and sighed. Once in a while, when their guest cried no, they looked at each other in the dark. They felt sorry for him and wished they could help. His heavy sobs were laden with pain. They were the deep guttural cries of a wounded beast. Chapter 32. When they woke up, he was already dressed and waiting. He hadn't changed from what he wore the previous day. His eyes were bright and sharp and betrayed no emotion. One look at him, and Ephraim decided not to encourage him to stay. Good morning, Mike, he greeted. Morning. Thanks again, Ephraim, for everything, Mike replied. His voice was husky, a first sign that the night had not been as good as he would admit. I really thought we would have time together and I could introduce you to some business prospects. Ephraim shrugged. I have to leave now. I'll definitely be back soon. I'll try to understand that, Ephraim said. I have a check for 50,000 naira here and 20,000 naira cash. I'll also give you the handset and line. I already stored my number and Alma's in it, and Esam's. Thanks. I'll be in touch. Mike rubbed his eyes. How much is the flight to Lagos? 12 grand. I'll advise we start going to the airport now. How about road transportation? No, you'd better go by air. I don't know what the rates are by road, but the roads are very bad. And money is not an issue. Believe me. How much can I spend? I need to know my limits, Mike said, checking the wall clock anxiously. He'd forgotten he had a wristwatch, Calvin Klein special. He hadn't used the wristwatch in 5 years. I'll get dressed and we'll talk about it on the way to the airport. Esam entered the main theater after scrubbing, with her hands lifted up, bent at the elbows. She acknowledged the greetings of the team of anesthesiologists who was already preparing the patient for surgery. One of them was Neil, a wiry, stiff-walking woman who she was sure couldn't have been anything other than a physician. The wiry woman was checking for the blood pressure while another was checking the pulse. A couple others were at the anesthetic machine discussing with grim faces. A sad smile crept over her face as her eyes met briefly with the patient's. Linda was her name. At just a year old, she had presented with a distended abdomen of 7 months duration and consequently severe weight loss. Resisting the urge to move over to reassure Linda, she went over to the Holy of Holies where her gown, drapes, and instruments were kept. She and her classmates had so christened that area because, as graduates, they had been forbidden to go there to prevent contamination of the sterile objects. Looking around, she caught the house officer, Dr. Ayu, perusing through the patient's file. Dr. Ayu, please, could you come over here? She said. The young man was sluggish and unenthusiastic. She had spoken with him only once, but had learned the man wanted to be a general practitioner and surgery was generally out of his league. Silently, he placed the file in the hands of one of the students and walked over to her. Tie this for me, will you? She said. He assisted her to put on the gown and tied the ropes behind her deftly. The tall, lanky doctor, she noticed, was better with simple errands. She saw him as a GP that would probably secure for himself a few good families. He will be family physician to for the next 50 something years. If he was smart enough, he would be sure to attach himself to rich ones. If he was smarter, he could get a contract with a company, a good company. Did you get the bags of blood? Esam asked. I got one, doctor. We may need more than one. They are aware, he said. She knew he didn't like her much either. How did he manage through med school? Oh, she knew. He had been one of her students, very average, never topped the class, but never failed a single course either. A nurse brought her gloves and face mask, allowing Dr. Ayu to slip away. She mumbled her thanks to the nurse and turned to have a full view of the theater. At this stage, it was bustling with activity. The anesthesia had been administered. She glanced briefly at the endotracheal tube placed to deliver the gases to the patient. A senior anesthesiologist stood at the head of the patient, monitoring the heart rate and oxygen level in her blood. It dragged her gaze back to Linda, and she muttered a word of prayer. The procedure she was about to perform was explorative, and the history, physical, examination tests, and scan results had not shown what the problem was. The medical students listened in rapt attention to the registrars as they cleaned the patients using swabs and antiseptic. The student nurses were also being lectured by the head nurse. Today, Mike. That alone made her heart skip a beat. She had to concentrate on this procedure. She couldn't afford to think about Mike, about what had happened last night, the rejection she'd felt, the rejection he felt, the yearning in her, the longing, the surprise appearance of his wife. She struggled not to think about him going back with her. She had to put him behind her. He was history now. All those months of pain, praying, holding on, working hard, thinking, hoping, believing, loving him. She drew in a ragged breath and shook off the sad feeling that had slowly crept over her. She needed to be happy for Linda. She straightened literally and adjusted her gloves. Drapes, she called. Here, the head nurse handed it over and stood aside as the drapes were used to cover the patient, exposing only the site for the surgery. Let's get happy, team. God is now in control. Let's begin, she said cheerfully. Scalpel, please. She stretched out her hand, and the nurse put the instrument in her hand. She quickly deleted everything else from her mind as she made the first incision. Mike landed at the Muritala Mohammed local airport, Ikeja, feeling like a lost sheep. Nothing much had changed here, but he knew the changes were from within him. He took a taxi to Ojota, where he got another taxi that would take him to Elisha. His new Glow line had 3 grand credit. He bought 3 additional Glow cards worth 3 grand, scratched the cards, and sent the digits with the simple words, I arrived safely. Thank you, Mike, to Esam. His journey to his hometown was full of painful memories. It had been long since he traveled anywhere with a commercial vehicle. On getting home 4 hours later, the neighbors came out to welcome him. They'd all heard of his victory, but had not expected him back home so soon. His mother, who'd been at the mercy of neighbors and friends, burst into tears when she saw him. She thought this would never happen again. He ate a small quantity of the pounded yam and okra soup his mother offered him and listened as as she briefed him of events that happened while he was away. Most of the tales were sad. Her son, Michael's elder brother, lived in Ushugbu with his family, working as an auto mechanic in the workshop Mike had set up for him. Life was fair with him and his small family of four. Her two daughters, Mike's senior and junior sisters, were both married off and lived in Oyo and Shaki, respectively. Both had remained far from home ever since the troubles hit their family. The house looked well kept and strong. He'd built that house for them apart from the estate he'd built. He was glad he did. It was a simple one-story building, just the old style with four bedrooms upstairs and four downstairs. The idea was for part of the house to be rented out so that his parents would have company when they'd all left home. It was what had saved his mother. She had tenants upstairs and had given out two rooms in the flat out downstairs with her to a mother of two whose husband worked in Ushugu. For the first time in over 48 hours, Mike slept in his mother's bed. He slept till evening, took a light meal of pap with green vegetable soup, and then slept again till dawn. He had slept almost 16 hours straight by the time he woke up around 11 a.m. the following day. He took his bath and wore a light floral shirt with combat shorts. He found his mother sitting on the veranda. She had a guest with her. It was Arike, Femi Williams's wife. Mike, she stood up to greet him as he came to meet them. Mike ignored her completely. He prostrated slightly before his mother and mumbled a greeting. Pele, Karo, Rosalind Dabi replied. Will you eat moi moi and ugi? Yes, please, I'm famished, Mike replied and took a seat beside his mother. His body felt rested enough already. He even felt like having a heavy meal. Rosalind called on the young lady that stayed with her to help and gave the orders. Arike, how are you? Mike looked at the woman. He had hidden his surprise and anger. Mike, I'm fine. How are you? I'm good. I'm no longer where your people put me. Mike smiled. Sit down. She did. He wondered what she wanted. Arika brought a bag of rice and lots of gifts for me, Rosalind said. Help me thank her. I won't be surprised if she'd never done that before, Mike hissed. Oh, Michael, Rosalind started. For the peace offering, thanks then, Mike said saucily. He was served his food and ate in silence. When he was through, he relaxed back in his seat. Why did you come and visit Mama? He asked Arike. Or is it me you came for? I came to see Mama, but I wanted to see you. What I have to tell Mama is really for you. Is that true? Look, Mike, you don't have to be cold to me, please. I know I am guilty, but I want you to forgive me. That's why I've come. I didn't know you would come here so soon, but I'm glad you can hear this for yourself. Arike, you're Sandra's friend, Femi's wife. Why should I be cold to you? Mike's voice dripped with mockery. I'm not here as Sandra's friend or as Femi's wife. I have come on my own, she said defensively. Mike gazed out into the paved parking space in front of the house at the cute white Honda CR-V Jeep Arike came with. He was responsible for their changed lifestyles. Now they were done with him. Why wouldn't they leave him alone? Okay, I'm listening. Mike forced himself to be polite. Mike, Arike went on her knees, embarrassing Mike and shocking Rosalind. I know what my family was like before you. Please sit, Arike, don't embarrass me. Arike took her seat. And stop saying you're sorry over and over. I've heard you, and it's okay. After you were locked up, Arike sighed. Sandra gave me two handsets. She said they were your lines, and she didn't want them. She also gave me some other items that belonged to you, some pens and card holders and stuffs. I didn't bring them anyway. She paused. Mike stared her down. I checked the phones and felt one was like a business line, so I kept it. and used it for myself. I turned the other into a commercial line. I didn't delete any of your numbers. Guilt didn't permit me to. She couldn't confess that she'd made good use of some of the contacts and joined her husband to lie about Mike's whereabouts. I brought the two phones for you. Perhaps you might need your old contacts. That's very thoughtful of you, Mike said dryly. He was actually impressed. He could see into her soul that she was genuinely sorry. I have to leave now. Mike decided to use her. Before you leave, do you have an idea of what happened to my other properties? Arika caught her breath. She had dreaded this question and had felt the full weight of the guilt from the day Sandra sent for her, and they jointly shared his properties from his shirts and shoes to his cars and houses. They disposed of everything. She sighed and decided to absolve herself of everything. I do. And before God and Mama, I'm going to confess as much as I know. She took a deep breath. Mike regretted asking. Your clothes and shoes, perfumes, and other personal effects were distributed between her brothers and father. Femi got a tie or two, cufflinks, wristwatches, perfumes. All those are gone. She used your Benz C class for a few months and then gave it to her junior brother, the one in university. He had an accident with it and died 2 years ago. Arike sighed. Rosalind gasped and shook her head in pity. The car was a write-off. Nemesis, Mike cursed. The E class was given to Femi. I got your Bora, but I sold it later, added money, and bought this Jeep. She sold the Lamborghini. The four company cars were all sold too. She has sold all your landed properties, including the house you guys were living in and your office building. What? Mike jumped up. Patience, my son, please. Rosalind tried to calm him down. She now understood why Sandra kept her distance. She couldn't believe the younger woman could be capable of such evil. Some of the properties she bought for herself, like your estate in Aguda, is now in her name. Your office building is also now in her name. All the furniture, electronics, home gadgets have been distributed to friends and family. Mike sat down weak, his plasma TV. He thought, how could she do this? And Mike, she trembled as she looked at his face. He prepared for the worst. She doesn't live here in Nigeria anymore. Ayo Dimeji is with her parents in Ikeja. She left my son and traveled out. What more evil could Sandra do? He thought his heart was going to burst. She remarried Sandra Chan. She married a Chinese businessman. And that's where I'm going to stop today. Tomorrow, I will continue reading um, from chapter 33. I cannot promise how many chapters I'll read tomorrow, but I will make sure I read. Thanks for joining. And please like, subscribe, comment, share. I love you. Ending stream.